So I found, Tony, like what was really strong for me is if I walked into a room of 10 people to make a sales call, we were going to give a presentation, I could walk around the room, shake everybody's hands, look in their eyes, and almost label them. Like I'd say, this person doesn't give a shit. This person could be the champion. This person is like the technical expert, that type of stuff. Then I'd sit down and I wanted to know how my gut did. So while the conversations are going on, I'm saying, oh, I was right about that person. Look at that. Or look at him. He doesn't really care. Or look at her. Listen to the depth of her questions. Wow.
I feel like it does take a certain persona to want to get into a specific position. And sales definitely.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I don't really pick. What I found is I don't pick one person or two people. I'm a believer that you want to be a student of the game all the time.
If you think of the entrepreneur, if you think of the CEO, C.R.O, if you think of just even the sales rep, it takes, as some would say, a certain DNA.
But the book is a big success. I mean, I've sold over 60,000 copies of that book. A nonfiction bestseller is 10,000 copies. I've sold 6,000 without any advertising, 60,000 without any advertising.
Wow.
The podcast is in the upper 2% of all podcasts in the world. No advertising.
Looking at the book, it's the way it's written, of course, is there's a hero story, right? You take someone who was down here and then all of a sudden you bring them up here. Transformation.
The hero's journey. The hero's journey. It's Rocky.
It's Rocky. It is. It's like Rocky.
I don't know. I just think that you should always be a student of the game. The day that you believe that you've cornered all the knowledge in sales or any other sport or profession, that's the day you're going down.
You've reached the Tony Moze Podcast, interviewing the most influential people around the globe. He's a former psychology worker and military veteran turned tech professional and entrepreneur with the goal to educate and inspire you to fulfill your dreams. Whether that's transitioning into a new job, increasing skills, or turning your hobbies into a money-making gig, Tony shows that the world is big and opportunities are endless. And now, without further ado, the Tony Moze Podcast.
John, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
You're welcome, Tony. Good to be here.
Such a good guy. Before we got on, of course, I wanted to, introduce myself and, of course, hear a little bit about you. It's super cool to know that you and I both came from New York City. I knew it and I heard it in the accent. I hear you on different shows and hearing you on different clips. And I'm like, his accent sounds so close to home.
It builds character at a young age.
Hell yeah.
You see some things that some people will never see in their lives and maybe shouldn't see.
Of course, read the book, love the way the book went. Before we go into it, of course, I want to actually ask too, you come from New York City. Would I assume you came from an Irish Catholic family? Yeah. Awesome. And I know, your parents, your dad had inspired you to say, hey, from HP or at least get into sales because that was a really cool and hot thing at the moment. Like, could I ask you, what was the profession of your family or like your pops and
yeah, so my mom and dad never even went to high school. And my dad's mom died when he was born. And he had a brother. And then the dad was alcoholic and left the kids on the street to fend for themselves. So they were in and out of foster homes, lived in abandoned buildings, kind of made their way. For 2 years at one time, they got taken out to a farm in Long Island, and a lady lost her farm. And then she said, hey, farmer next door, could you take these kids in? 13 and 14 years old. And he said, yeah, I could take them in, but they can only sleep in the chicken coop.
Huh.
So these guys, they came from nothing. And as an example, my uncle, who just died recently, my dad died at 48. He died at 93. And they had a really tough life, and they were fighting all the time in the streets, because they were living in abandoned buildings. And, at that time, New York City was kind of these, different areas. And if you ended up in a wrong area in an abandoned building, and then you walked out on the street in the morning, people were like, hey, who are you? Like, and they started with you. So,
yeah.
So my uncle was in the Army, joined the Army. He got into a fight. Somebody saw him fight, and it was the boxing coach. And he said, hey, why don't you come and join the boxing team? My uncle's like, hey, the last thing I want to do is fight more. So he said, well, we'll pay you $50 a fight. He said, you're going to pay me to fight? And the guy said, yeah. And he goes, okay. So my uncle actually went on to become Army champion, all forces champion, Pan Am champion.
Wow.
But these were kids. And then he would tell you that my dad was way tougher, but my dad didn't want to keep fighting. He just, these guys had scar wounds, knife wounds all over themselves, that type of stuff. So yeah, that's the type of environment that I grew up in. My dad was just like really tough, but he was also, even though he didn't go to school, he was smart. He became the youngest foreman for Otis Elevator in New York City, and wound up putting up things like the Twin Towers. He was the foreman, ran the whole jobs, stuff like that. But that's also what killed him, because he wound up getting what they call today mesothelioma, which was asbestos-induced lung cancer, is what it said on his death certificate, because he died at a young age at 48 years old. So,
wow.
But that was all a driver for me, because I just felt like, hey, here's a guy that sacrificed everything, really had a shitty life, and he gave me the opportunity to maybe be something different, and I'm not going to lose that opportunity. So that's always been a big driver for me internally. Yeah.
So because there was a part I remember hearing about, you discovered HP, or, you discovered sales. Your dad had inspired you, said, hey, why don't you get into sales, right? I'm thinking about what was in him. What do you think his rationale behind? I think I'm looking a little bit deeper, because, I feel like it does take a certain persona to want to get into a specific position. And sales, definitely, if you think of the entrepreneur, if you think of the CEO, C.R.O, if you think of just even the sales rep, it takes, as some would say, a certain DNA. But like, would you say that was one of the things that made him say, hey, I think you should get into sales because of that?
I actually don't know what made him say that. So what happened is he was an electrician, like I said. So he told me, I didn't know what to do. I was going to be the first person ever to go to college. Mm-hmm. So he said, why don't you go be an electrical engineer? But I didn't know what that entailed. If I would have known that, I would have never gone into electrical engineering. It was all math, and I think he thought it was like wiring up stuff, So it was my senior year, and I was one of the kids that could actually talk a little bit, even though I think I'm really more of like a extroverted-introvert. I could talk, but you heard the old joke about how you can tell if an engineer has a personality.
How?
They're staring at your shoes.
Oh, yes.
They're not staring at their shoes. They're staring at your shoes. So they made me the outside in electrical engineering, the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, but we had a student body. So they elected me president. Make a long story short, I ran a night where people from industry would come in. I'd had a panel with people from design and production and quality assurance. And then I had round tables for all the students. By the time I got done running the logistics, there was only one table that was open and nobody was there except the sales guy. So I sat down with sales. And up until that point, I thought sales was like, rental car guys or used car lot sales guys. And I could talk to the guy. I went home that weekend, even though I lived on campus, and I told my dad about the story. And he goes, well, I may not know that much about the world, but really good salespeople can make a lot of money in this world. And remember where I came from, I really didn't have anything. I worked my way through college. I was packing trucks at Secaucus, New Jersey from 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock at nights, getting home at 11, showering, falling asleep at the desk at usually 1 or 2 in the morning, doing it again. So that's what I did. And I went into sales, and I was selling for HP, selling electronic test instruments to electronic engineers. So that's kind of how I got started. Then CAD came about, computer aided design, electrical and mechanical. I got promoted to run a team from San Diego to Santa Barbara down in Southern California. And that's how I got into the CAD business.
Wow. So I had worked for a company called aPriori Technologies based out of Concord. And I was doing the business development there. And I remember, yes, they were leveraging, they were doing the whole digital twin, doing the digital factories or whatever, being able to cost and simulate what a product.
Like John Helm and Frank. Yeah.
Good guys, good people. Great the guys. Executive team were great.
Frank Azzolino, John Helm, all good guys. Really smart.
All great. Yep. I think there's Laura Faraday is at least has been the CEO thus far. Very good executive team. Really cool product. And I remember, yes, aPriori was, I think, slightly going up against PTC. They had their own little niche, but
it was a niche, yeah.
Pardon?
It was a niche product, yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely a niche product. So going back, somebody had said that you were a self-proclaimed introvert, but like now the way you said it right here, you said you're an extroverted introvert. I feel like as I got older, I become more of that. Like I felt I've always been extroverted, but like through time, I do like gathering my thoughts and sitting home by myself for days on end, even taking trips up to Maine and Acadia and just touring and hiking up in the woods. Yeah. So like it's, that's cool because the fact that you added extrovert into the introvert gives it a little different.
Well, I think here's what happens. I know some people when they give big presentations in front of a big audience, which I've had to do so many times, it's countless, right? Mm-hmm. I get off and I feel tired. And they get off and they're energized. They're ready to go party, And I can tell the difference. I'm like, wow, when I get done, I'm kind of a little tired. Like it took something out of me. But for them, they party. So they want to go. So they get energized. I don't really get energized by it. Not that I can't do it. It's just it's probably not where I reside. And then after I'm around people a lot, especially in a job like sales, I'll need like a weekend or at least a day where I can decompress, be away from some people, recharge my battery, do my, exercises, all that type of stuff that helps my mind and my body get ready to go do it again.
So, where do you think you were pushing the pedal to the metal? Like at which level were you like, was it when you were just a frontline sales manager, you started seeing where you were just go, I got to go meet with this person, go to a meeting here, meet with this sales rep, figure out what's going on with them. Like, where did all the pedal to the metal? Because I'm assuming you had long days, right? But where do you think like that, not speed, but just like that frequency of just constantly being bombarded by different people, where did that start?
It started when I was a sales rep. I was trying to sell this at that time, which today would probably be a $35, $40 million deal, trying to sell a $17 million deal to General Dynamics. And I was up against two major competitors, both of which were more, sorry about that, they had better products, more breadth of products, and I was just determined not to frickin' lose.
Nice.
So I knew everything that was going on in the buildings. I knew the politics. I was basically like running the elevators, like I don't know if you saw in those really old movies where somebody gets on, there's a guy that runs the elevator and he knows, hey, Tony, 3rd floor, how's the wife? How are the kids, So I knew everything that was going on, man. Yeah. So that's where I really learned how to go nonstop. And then from there, I went to a company called PTC where we were 0 revenue. And we ran that from 0 to 1.1 billion in 9 years. And that was just a rocket ship, and it was a nonstop rocket ship. It was Darwinism in the sense that only the strong survived. And you were constantly being tested. And not tested because the executives wanted to test you. You were being tested because every quarter, every year, the product the product changed, so the competition changed, so the messaging changed, the customers got more knowledgeable, so your messaging needed to change, how you interfaced with customers needed to change. You needed to call at higher levels of an organization. You were doing bigger deals and cost justifications, and so many people couldn't stay up with and adapt to those ever-evolving changes as the sale became more and more complex.
From building companies like PTC, Geotel, Ariba, Blade Logic, and BMC, especially Ariba, this was going on around the .com era, right?
Right, the crazy times, really crazy.
What's a message that one could tell a startup, say they've been getting some traction, right? They've gone beyond ideation. They're now executing. Maybe they want to exit. Maybe they just want to, just go public. Like, what is that chasm? What is that thing in between that they need to be able to cross? Like, what is something that they need to consider to be able to go from that startup into a multi-figure business going public?
Yeah. Well, first, you're just trying to see if you have any type of product market fit. You're just trying to say, okay, we have a product. Let's go out there and sell it to many different companies in many different industries and many different use cases and see where it might fit. Okay, where do we have product market fit? Early on, it may only be in like 2 different areas. Like at PTC, early on, it was with small electronic test manufacturers and it was with medical device manufacturers, very simple, mechanical things. At Snowflake early on, it was only gaming and ad tech. It wasn't, as prolific as it is now. So you go find, here's where I think I have product market fit and build like an ideal customer profile around that. So, what are the use cases? Who owns those use cases? Who's the persona I'm selling to? What are the pains in those use cases? How do my differentiators line up with the pains in those use cases? And what's the business outcome that these people need so that I can show that I can bring quantifiable value to those people, whether it's revenue, profitability, or risk. And once you build that and you start to go down, let's say those bowling alleys, like in the case of Snowflake, go down to ad tech and go down gaming. Now you're getting enough business that the product can start to get better. You're fueling development essentially. And now as you start to fuel development, you can go into some other avenues where you can handle these different use cases for different personas in different companies. So then you move from this product market fit to like the deal stage. Now I'm starting to do deals. Hey, I'm getting deals from like 4 or 5 different areas of companies. And I'm bringing the deals in. Now, what do these deals look like? Is the average deal size going up? Is the average deal size going down? Once I get a customer, are they buying more? Is the average deal size for existing customers going up? How many new logos am I getting every quarter? So you start to look at how many salespeople you have in. Some of those parameters I just talked about, like new average deal size, existing average deal size, percentage of dollars coming from new, percentage of dollars coming from existing. What is the productivity of my sales force? Is that constantly increasing? So as you see those numbers start to increase, you can start to say, if you wanted to go early, you'd like to see multiple quarters of the same types of performance constantly up and to the right, and the sales force is getting more productive. Okay, it's time to step on the gas. And now you move from, this deal stage to like scaling stage. Now we're going to hire like 100. We're going to go take a round of money. We're going to hire 100 sales reps. And again, we're going to be smart about where we put them. We're not just going to sprinkle the infield and put, one in New York and one in San Francisco, one in LA. And we're going to basically know where our ideal customer profiles are. Where's most of those customers located in what cities? And that's where we're going to start to put the reps in. Because too many companies make mistakes where they just think they sprinkle the infield. Let's put a rep everywhere. Chicago, Milwaukee, Dallas, St. Louis, Austin, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, when maybe that's not where you're going to make your reps the most productive. So we can go into scaling, but scaling has a lot of complexities to it. And some companies do it right and they're successful. some companies do it wrong and they burn a lot of money, and then they're basically done.
So what about looking respectively just what you went through with PTC, well, how about this? Ariba, around the .com era, I feel history repeats. We're in a very interesting economic financial time, for both the business and whatever, but there's a lot of opportunity, of course, especially for startups. And I guess maybe this could be a message, because they say great startups have come from really tough, turbulent economic financial times. But what was going on with Ariba around that time? What were some of the hurdles they had to navigate, the challenges that allowed them to, or at least, what were they dealing with at that time during the .com?
Well, the world was turned upside down, right? I mean, there were companies that had no revenue, no profitability, that were being bought for billions and billions of dollars. So it's really hard to reference the Ariba times when, when I was C.R.O. there'd be times when we would have like 16 corporate visits, and everybody wanted to do a deal with us. And they all wanted press releases, because you basically felt everybody was being hit by the analysts is when you're going to have a B2B marketplace. But the technology and everything was way too early. In fact, today they still don't do a lot of this stuff that, Ariba and other companies like Commerce One had said that they could do. So it's really hard to take any type of references out of that time, I think. It's usually, as a sales rep, you're asking customers after the deal is done for a press release. Here, and you're going to customers. Here, I would have like 16 corporate visits a day where they're asking me for a press release, and they haven't given me a purchase order yet. Wow. The world was really crazy at that time. And you knew it wasn't going to last. Now, the best part about it is, and I think some of that's happening today, maybe this is what you're alluding to, a lot of those companies didn't make it, right? Because they just didn't really have a product. They didn't know who their customers were. They were poorly run. And the same thing's going to happen now with a lot of companies that took money. They really don't have a great product. They really don't know how to run the company efficiently without burning tons of money and get to a place in the market where they can get another round of funding. In fact, a lot of companies that probably took money in the last couple of years, and let's say they took $100 million and their valuation's worth $1 billion. Mm-hmm. So if they need money right now, that valuation's not going to be $1 billion. They're going to take a down round. Yeah. So what's coming up next, Tony, is a lot of companies that are going to be taking down rounds. And so a lot of companies that are going to be going out of business.
Yeah, that's another thing. So basically, what's the metaphor? The red not the red carpet, but the rug is going to be, or somebody used the metaphor that, especially during these times, basically people will see who was the real ones and who were the fakers. So going back to press release, I've heard that before with musicians, of course. That was kind of like your portfolio, or at least that was something to be able to showcase to, A&Rs, music people. What's that? What does that mean? What does a press release mean in this sense?
You mean now or back then?
Back then, and then now.
Back then, they were getting the analysts off the CEO's back, because everybody was starting to formulate these B2B marketplaces. So let's say you were in healthcare. What they would do is they would say, let's get, Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and Merck and two other, companies, and get them together. And today, let's say they each spend $2 billion a year, just normally, right? And now you had the Ariba system that could keep track of that $8 billion and where it all went. But now what you could also do is you could basically charge a toll for anything that went through the marketplace, and even external vendors, you could charge a toll, and that toll could start to amount to a bunch of revenue. And you could point back to the fact that, hey, there's other companies today that have zero revenues, zero profits, zero products, and they're going for billions of dollars. Well, if you guys have an $8 billion marketplace where spend is going through there, and you can prove that you're capturing like a toll or a percentage of that business every year, then why can't you create a new company with a CFO, CEO, all the C-level people, and then run that company and take that onto the marketplace and, and go public. That's really what was going on. It was a really weird time.
Of course, you talk with John Kaplan about this too. And I agree with him that it's the way it's written, of course, is there's a hero story, right? You take someone who was down here and then all of a sudden you bring him up here. Transformation.
The hero's journey. It's Rocky.
It's Rocky. It is. It's like Rocky. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the hero's journey. It's Rocky. It's the Rocky story you bring in here. And then the cool thing too is that, you keep the readers, at least my attention, by making the chapters brief. So now it's cool, so people get to really feel like that whole like journey of the transformation. Of course, I see that in the book. And of course you talk about that, but just the whole, the upward progression, you took them from. Another thing I want to say too, John, is like, this is a guide. I think this is like a guide because it literally literally guides people, because you had asked them the fundamental question, why? And you kept asking why. How do you do this? Why? Like even like the speech, what is the company's, how do you define this? One person was defining it in this way. Another rep said it this way. They had their own definition, but this helps to standardize things, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It keeps people in line. And we could go from there and say, because especially when I was doing cold call, I did do the company script, but then eventually I added my own flavor that made me very successful. But I really do believe people should always start with the foundation, like you say, kind of do what's, sometimes it's not all about ninja kicks and backflips. I know you talked about, just to paraphrase in your book, like it's not, the whole, the two animals that you use, the sly fox, and the other animal.
And the fox.
And say it again?
The fox and the hedgehog.
The fox and the hedgehog. And sometimes, if not most, you could just be the hedgehog.
Yeah.
Right? Just keep it simple. It's not that.
Well, that's really what I was trying to say. It's the people that win are the people that, keep it simple and only pay attention to the fundamentals of the game, right? Because it's hard enough just to master the fundamentals of the game, let alone trying to go do like 3-point shots or half point, shots from, half court. Yeah. Those things are going to go in once in a while, but they're not going to take you to the championships.
Yeah. But it's good to start with that foundation, because at least you have something that's measurable, right? It's not subjective. It's not in your head. Well, Carlos does it this way. Well, let's go pick his brain. Or Mary does it this. No, you have a standard. It's set, and it's how you can measure it and go from there.
I'm a big sports fan. So, right. So you join a team. You have a favorite sport?
I'll say the New York Giants.
Okay. You join a football team. They got a playbook, right? You got to learn the playbook. That's your knowledge that has to go into your head, right? Then you go, and they have a name for everything. They got a name for every play. They got a name for every position, and they got a name for where everybody's supposed to be on the field, right? That's all the knowledge-based stuff. Then they put you on the field, and now they see whether or not you can execute. Do you have the skills to execute these plays? Right? So why is that any different than sales? You have a sales process. Here's all the different steps or plays in the sales process, all the different stages. And here's the common vocabulary. So if I call you into the huddle and I say it's blue 68 right, you don't go, well, blue, what's blue? Is blue? What is blue? You don't have a different vocabulary. You can't.
Right. Can't.
So same in sales. We have to know when we say champion, everybody has the same image. When we say economic buyer, everybody has to have the same image. You can't have different images. Otherwise, just plain old English is failing you. Right. So you have to start with that. You have to start with a sales process that you can all agree on with different steps and stages. That's your playbook. And now we execute. We train people, we onboard people, we go on sales calls with people, and all we're constantly trying to do is see how do they run those different plays and what type of knowledge may they be lacking on that play, or what type of skill do they need to execute the play. Maybe Tony knows what he's supposed to do when he gets into this meeting, but he actually can't pull it off. So as a leader, I got to recognize that. I take him outside. Tony, how do you think you did? Well, I did good, John. Like, I know I was supposed to do this, but I just didn't know how to do it or when to do it. Okay, dude, we're going to work on this. The next meeting, I'm going to go do it for you. You're going to pay attention. I'll be your role model. But then the next time you're going to do it, I'll be there as like a safety net for you.
Yeah.
But you're going to do it, right?
Looking at the differences in responsibilities, mentalities, or mindsets between the CEO, the C.R.O., and the board member, like just combing through each one of these three questions, like number one, like what makes a C.R.O. different than a CEO? Because to me, I feel like they're both like selling. But again, if you could just clarify.
Well, all the revenue responsibility is on top of the C.R.O. And the C.R.O. these days typically has like business development. A lot of times they have marketing, they have customer success, and they have, professional services. So the entire revenue responsibility is on their shoulders. Now, when they need support from the CEO, whether that's to, go make some sales calls, go to talk to some industry analysts, or do whatever they need to do in order to help bring in more revenue, that's when the C.R.O. is going to try to interface with the CEO. They also interface a lot in the beginning of the year when you're putting together compensation plans, you're putting together, the plan for how much you're going to book this year, putting together like a productivity model that shows, okay, here's how many reps we have, how many will we hire throughout the year, what's the average productivity we expect from these reps. And this is based upon that. Last year we did 50, we expect to do 100 next year, right? And when they build those models, what falls out from them is basically a hiring plan. How many more reps you need, managers, systems engineers, professional services people, customer support people, that type of stuff. The interaction that the C.R.O. has with the C.F.O. is when you're trying to model, let's say, a compensation plan. There might be a bucket just for how much money you can spend on compensation plans throughout the year. So you're running through different compensation plans so that you can try to get the behavior of what you want your people to do, but you're constantly bouncing it off the C.F.O. saying, like, how much is this going to cost us for if we do this plan? And based upon cost and what you're trying to achieve with your sales force, you're making constant changes to the compensation plan before you let it go. And then the C.F.O. and usually legal reports to the C.F.O., those two people become pretty critical at the end of the quarter when you're trying to do a deal. Hey, can we take these terms? And what about, doing a finance deal? This customer only wants to pay quarterly. Let's take these deals, and it has to be a conversation between you as a C.R.O., the C.F.O., and the legal team as to how many of those deals they can afford to take.
Okay, so if I could summarize, the C.R.O. is actually more doing more the inner workings of the go-to-market than the CEO is. The CEO is just looking more at the overall company vision.
They're looking more strategically, where is the company today? Where does it need to be tomorrow? What are the competitive threats that I have? What type of new products do I need to bring to market? Like with this whole AI thing that just popped up recently. I mean, a lot of CEOs were caught off guard, but there's no doubt that AI is going to, maybe enhance some companies and really maybe end, the life of some companies if they weren't really on top of this thing. Now, I don't think anybody today actually knows the total impact of what it's going to do, but that's going to start to evolve over the next couple quarters. So, but that's really the job of the CEO, typically working with the CIO and or the chief product officers, that are trying to understand where are we today? Where's the competition going? Where's the market going?
And I guess going back again between the dynamic of the C.R.O. and this, between the C.R.O. and the CEO, like what kind of influence did you have on the CEOs that you worked with? Like, what was like your day-to-day with them? What was your impact for them or on them?
My impact was really getting them to truly understand what it takes to sell deals, and why, and I was a big proponent of training and developing my people, and why, and some of them may not have understood that initially, but then they understood it after we spent the money, hired the people to go ahead and do the training enablement over the course of time, like constant. Now, it's not a one and done, because your product's always changing, competition's always changing, and you have to constantly train your sales force. And through that process, they'd come to understand, oh, wow, this really has a big impact. So we spend, let's say, even $200,000 on training, but you have, 300 salespeople. That's a huge leverage, that 200,000 across 300, salespeople, especially if you just made, let's say, on 350,000 salespeople, and they were all selling on average productivity of $1 million, and you got them to just go to 1.1. That's $100,000 times 350 people. That more than pays for the $200,000 that you lumped in and threw into training. So you start to get them to understand the equation and the power and the leverage you get from, training your people, and why it's so mission critical over the course of time.
Are you enjoying this episode? Please give a like, comment, follow, or subscribe. And now, back to the Tony Moze Podcast.
So I think about like you being in leadership positions, and it gets inspired, or at least it starts from somewhere. I mean, you did tell the story a little bit about your dad. Your dad was a fighter. He bred an amazing person. I think about my mother and my father. They bred me. My mother was the go-getter too. And we started businesses, and, she always encouraged me, even at 9 years old, to go door to door, knocking on people's doors to either sell newspapers, or you do even like do little things like take out the trash. Oh, I'll rake your leaves. I'll rake the leaves off your lawn. I'll shovel the snow. And I'm like 11, 12 years old. So, I got inspired by that, and she's definitely one of my role models, I'd say. But like through your time, starting as a first line manager all the way up to getting to, C.R.O. and board member, like what are the people, places, and things that have been like your inspiration to your leadership style?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I don't really pick. What I found is I don't pick one person or two people. I'm a believer that you want to be a student of the game all the time. So there's things that people say inside, the sales industry and outside the sales industry that I take a piece of. I feel like I take a piece of them and I put that inside of me, So I don't really have like one role model or two role models. I have like hundreds that had a huge effect on me, and I try to take a little piece of all of them. Because I'm always listening, even still to today, I'll listen to anybody talk about sales, and every once in a while, somebody will say something. I go, oh my God, that's brilliant. Like, I'm going to add that to my bailiwick. So I think that, I don't know. I just think that you should always be a student of the game. The day that you believe that you've cornered all the knowledge in sales or any other sport or profession, that's the day you're going down. You're not going up anymore, because nobody knows it all. And even in sports, the people that are at the highest levels, the difference, the subtleties, it's marginal. It's so marginal. And how did they get there? They took advice from so many different people and just mastered their skills over and over and over again. And I don't think that's different in any profession, and it's certainly not different in sales.
Who would you say, if you could pick up? I know you've been able to be inspired by many people. If you could pick maybe a few that maybe many people would know, maybe popular ones, who would they be?
Well, man, when I was young, like I boxed also. So like Muhammad Ali was like my hero. Like I used to box in this thing called the Police Athletic League from the time I was 6 till I was 16 years old. And Ali in our younger days he always wore white shorts. Well, in PAL, the colors were green and white. So sometimes in a tournament, they'd give the green shorts to me. And I'd have to go up to my opponent and say, dude, like, you got to give me those white shorts, because there's no way I'm fucking boxing in these green shorts. Because Muhammad Ali he's not boxing in green shorts, So, and then, along the way, a lot of it was like sports heroes and a lot of people really that showed like persistence and determination. Like even in cycling, you can say what you want about Lance Armstrong, but for me, at a certain point in my career, I really became into cycling, and his determination, his work ethic was just off the charts, right? His attention to detail. So that, things like that were inspiring too. So, yeah, it's a lot of different, like I said, it's a lot of different people that go into my mind.
Yeah. In the book too.
I think the thing that sticks the most for me is it's really not how smart you are. I'm not the smartest guy in the world. It's not how charismatic you are. That helps. It's not what a great presenter you are. It's none of those things really. At the end of the day, it's how persistent you are in trying to achieve those skills, gain that knowledge and develop those skills that are really going to carry you a long way. And you see too many times in life, in business, and in sales where people have one or two really great characteristics and they hang on to that their whole career. They never branch out and try to master other skills or traits that can really expand their horizons. They get too comfortable with one or two things.
Wow. Yeah. I was thinking when I'm looking into the book and I grabbed this without even meeting you, I was like, okay, besides you asking a lot of questions, you kind of had this perspective where like, I don't know, I felt obviously curiosity, but like you have this kind of EQ about you. And I was curious to know like, where does that come from? Does that come from, maybe your upbringing, you learning this from mom and pops? Was it coming from somebody else? I mean, just to be able to sit there and have the patience to really go through people and their, just learn about them, what makes them tick, why do they do what they do? Like, not everyone has that. And I'm just always curious too, like, where does that come from for you? Like, that. I
think intuition did start when I was a younger kid. Like, when you're on the street and you're around, lots of other guys and different things are going down, sometimes positive, sometimes negative, sometimes just sports. But then I realized, because of what we talked about earlier in the podcast, where I'm more of a extroverted-introvert, that I was more comfortable sitting back, letting other people do the talking in sales meetings. And I'd only ask a question when I really thought it was a pertinent question. I didn't have to talk. Like, I didn't feel compelled to talk. And a lot of people, I think, feel compelled to talk. And my power really came from because I was listening to my gut all the time. It's not something I think you can turn on and turn off. You have to learn how to turn it on and when to trust it and how to trust it. So I found, Tony, like, what was really strong for me is if I walked into a room of 10 people to make a sales call, we were going to give a presentation, I could walk around the room, shake everybody's hands, look in their eyes, and almost label them. Like, I'd say, this person doesn't give a shit. This person could be the champion. This person is like the technical expert, that type of stuff. Then I'd sit down and I wanted to know how my gut did. So while the conversations are going on, I'm saying, oh, I was right about that person. Look at that. Or look at him. He doesn't really care. Or look at her. Listen to the depth of her questions. Wow. So, and it was my intuition that then told me, like, here's some people we have to follow up on, not only because of the questions that they asked, but some of my initial intuition on those people. And I found that over time, like my intuition was like a second processing unit. You have your head. And I think a lot of times these days, people spend too much time in their head processing data, and they want more data. And these days we have so many sales and marketing tools that give us more and more data. But don't you want to back up sometimes and say just like, well, what's really going on? What's really happening? I see all this data, but why? What's happening? How come? And let's get down to the people side of this. There's all this data. Okay, I got it. But what's going on with the people? You know, do I have a morale issue? Do I have a compensation issue so the people aren't getting paid what they need to get paid? So now I'm getting a morale issue. Is there some people that are in here that are talking negative and causing a little bit of cancer in the organization? You know, what's going on? What's behind these numbers? Because it's all about people at the end of the day. It's not about the numbers. I mean, the numbers are what we post in annual reports, but that's not really how it was made.
You talk about in the book presence too, and I think within the whole minutia of data's numbers, this and that, what I'm hearing you say, it's good to just push away from it, right? And you know, you know, like, because when you're in that whole day to day, your head is too much into it. You don't really get to see everything. You don't get that whole global. You know, you don't get a chance to take a breather. And I always notice too, like when I take even something as small as like I'm doing my day-to-day work, by taking a 5-minute, you know, getting away from that area, going for a walk, maybe grabbing some water, bio break, whatever you want to call it. And then I come back, I feel more productive, but I'm also able to assess a little bit more clearly. It's not coming, you know, there's a lot of things to say about that. I also believe life is a school. And there's always a lesson, but I also like to say there's like life is like research, and I love to do the research on people, places, and things. And the fact that you said like, hey, let me test this. I know I had a hunch about this individual, but let me see if this is confirmed. Let me talk to them, because you know there's these things called cognitive biases that all humans innately have. There's about at least minimum 24 of them that we have. And, you know, sometimes we get stuck in our own head, just like you said, and that could sometimes be detrimental to success. It
also happens like when you're trying to make a decision. Let's say people came into my office and it's 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and I'm a little tired for some of the stuff that went on that day. And they present a bunch of data to me. And they'll say, okay, John, you got to make a decision. What do you want to do? And I'll go, I don't know. They'll be, what do you mean you don't know? You have to make a decision. I go, I know I have to make a decision, but do I need to make the decision now? No. Okay. So I'll make the decision. Well, when are you going to make the decision? I don't know. I might be on a run in the morning. I might be in the shower. I might be driving to work. I might even be driving home from work tonight, and it might hit me. But it's my gut that then resonates with my head. I heard what you said. I heard all the logic and the data behind it. But now I need to, for some reason, my gut didn't resonate. It didn't ring true. So there's a disconnect. And once those two things connect, I'm like, okay, it's clear what the decision is, you know, and then I can make a decision. And that's what you learn as you go up the ladder is you're not forced. You're not the answer man. You're not forced to make a decision right now. Nice. You know, sometimes there's true urgency to a decision, and you're running out of the element of time. But there's many times where there is extra time and you don't have to make a decision right now, especially if your gut is telling you something's just not right here. They're leaving something out. They might be spinning the ball, or maybe they're giving me all the right information, but it just doesn't feel right yet.
So literally and metaphorically, it's good to sleep on it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah. So from the book, you know, on the transformational mindset, and from the Hunter and Unicorn show, I remember you were talking with Simon about company challenges. And to paraphrase, you know, you said that the success of leaders should be from the success of those they lead. Besides being scorekeepers, you know, just staring at CRMs all day, you know, looking at the day-to-day, you know, all day managing KPIs on how many calls they made, emails sent, or video clips sent to prospects. Should first line managers be, in a sense, holding the hands of their sales reps? Like what are some things managers should be doing to ensure their sales rep success?
Going out on sales calls with them, just like, you got to go out on sales calls. You have to figure out, you have to be intimate with your people. Let's back up. You have to be intimate with your people. What do I mean by being intimate? You have to be intimate in understanding their strengths and their weaknesses. It's nice if you get to know them, where they came from, like you were asking me, and understand, hey, here's some of their fears, uncertainties, doubts. Here's their goals. And you can understand all those things, especially if you're going out on making sales calls, because that's what I might call windshield time. You're in the car, you're in a train, you're on a plane. You got plenty of time to put the phone down, not check, Instagram, and you can basically ask really good questions and get to know these people. So you can become intimate with them and understand what their goals are, fears, insecurities, doubts, strengths, weaknesses. And only then, when you're on a sales call with them, can you understand why they had a hard time pulling something off and where you need to step in and then after the call, where you need to coach them and maybe further train them. But everybody's completely different. Anybody that's had kids, if you have 3 kids that grew up in the same household, the same mom and dad, those 3 kids are completely different. They're not the same. They have different strengths, weaknesses, fears, insecurities, doubts, goals, all that type of stuff. So you can't treat your people cookie cutter. And that's what a lot of first line managers like to do. They like to treat them cookie cutter, number one. Number two, they like to believe that everybody's just like them and everybody's motivated just like them. And everybody's not always motivated just like them. I remember one time I had a woman that was out in Seattle and people were frustrated with her and they say she's just not like coin operated is what they called her, meaning she wasn't just after the money. So I went out and when I was out in the area, I went out and had dinner with her. And I came to find out, only because I'm asking questions and trying to get intimate with her, well, she had a husband that was super wealthy. She didn't have to work. Her fun came from and her wins came from helping other people and going out and doing big deals, for the company. But she wasn't necessarily coin operated where you could just run her like you could run everybody else. So they were trying to motivate her by saying, oh, you can make more money. And she was looking at him like, that's not what motivates me. Because she was completely different than the other 4 reps on the team, right? So you with me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you're not intimate with your people, if you don't spend time with them to get to know their backgrounds and what motivates them, then it's pretty hard to motivate them.
So rapport building is important.
You think?
I've always thought that was the thing since working with children, adolescents, rapport, everything.
It is. It's everything.
Very good outcomes have come from rapport.
It's really, truly being interested in helping people develop. And I have a motto. I've always had the motto that if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll get what you want. And it works. It works. Like I do these podcasts. I don't make money on it. 0. I do the book. I make a little bit of money, but at the end of the day, it's really nothing, especially for the amount of work I put into it. Those 2 things are to give back. But the book is a big success. I mean, I've sold over 60,000 copies of that book. A bestseller, a nonfiction bestseller is 10,000 copies. I've sold 6,000 without any advertising, 60,000 without any advertising.
Wow.
The podcast is in the upper 2% of all podcasts in the world. No advertising.
Revenue builders?
Yeah. And I think it's because you're just trying to help other people. I'm not trying to make money. The only agenda is educate people, help them do what took me a long time to find out.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. That's something obviously people who are listening should definitely take heed about. I wanted to go back to the whole scorekeepers. I was in a situation like that, of course, as a new individual in the sales area, and we would call them dashboard managers because that's all they looked at. And
I used to call them that they were flying the desk.
A fly on the desk?
Flying the desk. All they needed was headphones and a little bit of headgear, and then they could basically fly the desk, with all their panels and shit.
When I think of scorekeeping, because, this is, I don't know how pervasive this whole idea of scorekeeping culture is. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. And of course, I've heard sales reps talk about this too, but I like to ask, where does a scorekeeping culture come from? I mean, I had assumed it was maybe being too young of a company, meaning either in age or experience wise, or growing pains of a startup. But is there something else? Where is the scorekeeping culture? Where does that originate from? And how is that brewed?
I think it originates from laziness. They think they got into the manager role, and now they don't have to go out and really make sales calls anymore. They're getting lazy. If you really cared about your people, you would have done like me, where you threw out all your stuff at HP, threw everything in the garbage can, and made sales calls with your people.
So how about this whole idea? I've heard sales reps say this, but let's go from the top. You talked with John Kaplan and also mentioned this in your book, that 62% of sales reps fail because they're assigned to the wrong accounts, which had me thinking of a phrase I'd hear sales reps say: they put me in a horrible patch, aka a region of USA or North America, where either there's little to no business out there, or the customers don't have the understanding of buyer enablement, etc. What are your thoughts about sales reps saying this? What are your thoughts about reps saying that the reason why they're doing horribly is because they were put in a difficult or rough patch?
I think some of it could be true, and a lot of it's not true. But, I think very few companies, though, that I've seen, very few, actually go out and understand who their ideal customer profile is every year as it changes, and then understand where those, what use cases they are, what personas they're going to sell to, what companies those personas are in, and what industries those companies in, and then take a big look at, let's say, just the U.S. map. We'll leave Europe and Asia for next, but just to give the concept. Now, where are all those companies located? Okay, they're located mostly in these 10 cities, but we have reps in 15 cities. Okay, so maybe we need to reallocate the number of reps that we have in the cities where we have the most amount of opportunity to sell to our ideal customer profiles. And so many companies don't go through that process. All they do is do what I call sprinkling the infield. They're going to put one rep in LA, one in San Francisco, one in Seattle, one in Boston, one in New York, down the line, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Miami. That's what they're going to do. And then they're going to hope that they sell. So maybe the guy down in Miami is true. There's just not enough of these companies that we're supposed to sell to down in Miami. But maybe the guy in the Bay Area has 200 accounts to sell to. So all of a sudden they look like the heroes. And I've seen this at companies where, the people in the West that are selling low-end tech products because they're selling to a lot of startups look like freaking heroes, when at the end of the day, their sales capabilities are no better than the ones that are trying to bang their head against JP Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley in New York. But JP Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley are not in the ideal customer profile. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the work. There's one company I work with where every year they go through that balance. Every year. And it's really the only company I know that does it. And they not only look at ideal customer profile, because that can come out where, let's say, Morgan Stanley and the big banks show up at top, they could buy a lot. But now what you do is you label in, well, what is the propensity of these companies to buy, right? Meaning what? So if it's your product, are they all in on the cloud? Do they hire the best developers? Do they, and you can find a lot of this other stuff out, have they bought the latest and greatest technology tools? And now what you'll do is you'll start to change that list that came out on ideal customer profile and reprioritize it based upon the propensity for that customer to buy. And now what you do is you label on another set of criteria. What is the sales complexity? How hard is it for a startup company to get a deal out of these companies? And you'll find, well, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan Chase, the Department of Defense, they're going from, they used to be at the top, they're at the bottom, right? And now you're looking at sales complexity. How fast can I get an order out of these people? Do they have a quick time to market? Those types of things. And then those are the companies you're going after. And like I said, one company I know does it every year, and it rebalances the whole sales force.
Where do you think the future of sales is headed? Like for both the customer, for the sales rep and the customer, how's that vantage point going to look maybe 10 years down the line? I mean, because now we hit post-pandemic, or, I feel like there's BC and there's AD. Now there's before pandemic and there's after pandemic. You could perhaps put in the Bible now, but I'm just thinking what is that landscape perhaps going to look like in sales for both the sales rep and the consumer if you were to look future facing?
Yeah. I don't know. No, if I had to take some guesses, I got to imagine that you're going to see more and more, PLG, and
profit loss growth.
Yeah, product-led growth. Yeah,
product-led growth. Okay,
you're going to see a lot more of that. That makes sense for some products, but not for all products. You're going to see more and more like free tier where people can try the product out. That goes along with PLG.
Okay.
But at the end, and maybe some of the low end may get commoditized because of that. But I think if you are a salesperson and you're listening to this and you want to have a career in sales, then it's even more reason to really develop your knowledge and your skills to become like true enterprise sales reps and get up high in organizations where you can sell really big deals. And again, that takes time. That takes a lot of work. You got to gain a lot of knowledge, and you have to develop a lot of skills in order to be able to do that. Because that's where there's always going to be money. I mean, people aren't going to do a PLG thing and then pick up the phone and say, hey, Tony, give me $30 million of that stuff. That's just not going to happen. So, because I remember back in like 2000, I was looking for a new opportunity after the internet collapse. And people were telling me, John, enterprise sales is dead.
Huh.
And I said, really? Enterprise sales is dead? Yeah, John, you're an enterprise sales rep or person, and enterprise sales is dead. I said, really? So you think, I throw it back to them, that some company is going to buy $1 million worth of software or $10 million worth of software off a 25-year-old kid that's on inside sales that they never saw him, never did a justification, never saw a presentation. They're just going to buy $5 or $10 million worth of software. And then they just look at me. Then I realize I got to get out of their office. But I don't think that's going to happen in the future either. So there's going to be some changes. AI is going to bring some changes. PLG, stuff like that's going to bring some changes, but I don't think that it's going to fundamentally change what people are doing in enterprise sales.
What would you say has been just so consistent from when you started in the 80s till now? Like, what has been that same thing that you just noticed, like, this is it? This is like, you're in sales when, kind of idea, like, or just like, what has not changed? What has, just been constant since the 80s till now?
That in any organization that you're going to sell to, you got to go find a champion. And if you're going to get a really big deal, you got to find a champion, and a champion that can get you to the economic buyer. And you have to find big problems, not small problems. Companies can live with, they have thousands of problems, but which ones are mission critical? Which ones require third-party attention? Like if you right now, cut 2 of your fingers, you go get some Band-Aids and put it on. But if you come out of this meeting and you get on your bike or something and you crash and you separate your shoulder and you get a concussion and you break a couple ribs, you require third-party attention. It's a mission-critical problem. And that's the same thing with companies. Like they have some problems that they can live with, most problems they can live with. They can work around it. But where are the problems that are above the noise, the ones that are really going to catch the attention of the high-level executives that are going to have the biggest impact on revenue, profitability, and risk. Those are the ones you want to go after. And that's never changed, never will change. I used to go to other countries and they would tell me, oh, John, it's different here in France. It's different here in, Germany. And I go, really? You guys do annual reports here? And they go, yeah. And I go, let's open one. Revenue, profitability, and risk. I said, I don't think it's any different. And then let me ask you a second question. If you think it's different everywhere else, how many other countries have you sold into? And they'd go, none. And I go, then how the hell do you know it's different? So it really isn't different. As long as all these companies are going to be measured by revenue, profitability, and risk, there's always going to be good salespeople that are going to find a way to find pain in these organizations that's preventing them from maximizing profitability, from minimizing costs, and from minimizing risk. That won't change.
I noticed you started off in PTC with, the acronym MEDDICC, but it started off first like a slow movement. It was like you put M, then you had to do some things and learn about how everything was working with the workflow and customers. Then you got E, then you got, D, right? Like it was building. It wasn't like all there. It wasn't just like, we're going to like label this MEDDICC. It was like kind of like building each letter through time, correct?
Yeah. What happened was, originally we were a startup company, right? So first 7 releases of the software, at that time you only released software every 6 months. That was called rapid prototyping.
Hey friends, thanks for listening, but the last part of this episode should be saved for reading the book. So go pick up The Qualified Sales Leader, Proven Lessons from a 5-Time C.R.O., written by John McMahon, as it gives you more insight into how he was able to turn average salespeople into spectacular ones and average companies into multi-million-dollar mega successes. Also, if you want more of a deeper understanding of MEDDICC, which is a sales methodology in qualifying prospective customers and buyers, I suggest you also pick up the book MEDDICC, The Ultimate Guide to Staying One Step Ahead in the Complex Sale, written by Andy White. I have left the links of both of those books in the description below.
If you enjoyed this episode, remember to like, comment, follow, or subscribe. And for more information, be sure to check out the description. Thank you for tuning in, and hope to see you again for the next episodes of the Tony Moze Podcast.